Welcome to another episode of the Robinson Hewitt Pod. This is where we talk about the anthropology, technology, and what it will mean to be human in the next era of tech. I'm your host, Alison Mackey. I'm a futurist, a professional director, anthropologist of emerging technology, and founder of Robinson Hewitt Consulting. So what do we do at RHC? We're all about transforming the traditional with the unseen for the next era of innovation and ideas. We bridge the gap between the digital and human by blending technology, strategy, and future systems thinking with applied ethnographic research to help enable human-centered innovation and transformation ready for the next era. Welcome. So this past week, a lot of us here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, woke up on Wednesday morning and couldn't access our bank accounts. I won't name names, but my usual and very trusted bank was down. The app was down, internet banking was down, and over 690 people reported issues within the first hour. And the responses were exactly what you would expect. I have bills to pay. I have very important business transactions to make. I can't even book an Uber. The cards still worked and ATMs still worked, but that didn't matter to most people. The psychological hit was immediate and the sense of helplessness as well. And I sat with that for a little bit because what stood out to me was the reaction. It's a very specific flavor of panic that comes when something you've completely forgotten you're dependent on suddenly disappears. And that's the thing I want to talk about today. It's money. It's what it actually is, where it comes from, where it's going, and what it's actually asking of us right now. Because we are at a very important and strange time in history where value and exchange, and most importantly, the conversations around all of this are happening at the wrong register entirely. So let's take a look at the current state of play when it comes to money, finance, and our economy. So the bank wasn't hacked, there was no fraud, and nobody lost any money. The digits were totally fine, but the access to the digits were temporarily unavailable. And that was enough to destabilize people in a really real way. And that's actually the thing that's worth deconstructing here, is that access and what happens when it's taken away. We've built an entire civilization on a system that at its core runs on trust and agreement. We agree that these numbers on a screen represent something real. We agree that when you tap your phone at the counter, something of equivalent value moves from you to that business. It's an extraordinary complex and extraordinary fragile social contract that we've created. And most of the time, it works so seamlessly that we've stopped to even notice that we're even within the system. But the infrastructure underneath that agreement is aging. And it's not just in New Zealand, it's globally. The systems built in the 70s and the 80s are being progressively patched together and updated, and they're starting to reach their limits. So my banking issue and many others last week isn't an isolated event, and it's happening exactly at the moment where the geopolitical environment is becoming more and more volatile. Our supply chains are becoming more exposed, and the question of who controls financial infrastructure is becoming genuinely contested. So I've spent a good portion of my career in spaces where people are innovating and trying to rethink this area through digital currencies, decentralized finance, and open banking. And what I find interesting that the urgent conversation is always about the technology. It's the protocol, it's the token, it's the platform, it's the API. But the most important conversation, and the one that I actually think determines what happens next, is about the social contract that is underneath all of this. What do we collectively agree has value? Who gets to have the say? And what happens to those agreements when they start to shift? So in order to understand where we're going, we have to take a little bit of a look back in time. And the first important thing to note is that money has never actually been just about money. It has always been the story that we tell together, and our anthropological records makes this very clear. So one anthropologist in particular, Marcel Mauss, he was writing in the early 20th century and was one of the first to really map out the distinction between the two modes of exchange that exist in every single human society. What he called the communal realm, which was the thing that were done for their own sake, and the market realm, where exchange was transactional, a means to an end. So gift economies versus commodity economies. Try saying that 5 times fast. And the crucial insights that he had, which economists have been reluctant to fully absorb, is that these two modes aren't opposite. They coexist. And every economy at every scale has both. But what shifts the ratio between these two and what changes the ratio is culture, power, and time. So gifts and the real gifts in a true anthropological sense have use value. They hold meaning because of the relationship that they carry, and commodities have exchange value. They're interchangeable. A liter of milk is a liter of milk. But the thing is, gifts are also political. They contain calculation, and there is obligation embedded in reciprocity. But with that, markets also have ethics. They have contracts, obligations, and reputational systems. The line between them is real, but it's not where we think it is. And money itself, across cultures and through history, have never been a single uniform thing. Many societies had two distinct forms of currency, one for everyday exchange and one for ritualistic purposes. And the two were not interchangeable. A shell bead money, pig tasks, woven mats, these held wealth in a form that was not simply reducible in market price. They carried social meaning, status, and relationship. But with what we've done in modernity, it's collapsed all of that into a single universal medium and then progressively abstract that medium further and further away from anything actually tangible. We went from gold and silver, the things that had physical weight to them, to paperback gold, to paper backed by government promise, to digits on a screen backed by institutional trust, which brings us to the moment that we're at right now. And then we kind of fast forward a little bit to October 2008, the exact moment the global financial crisis wiped $2 trillion from the world's economy, the moment where institutional trust in banks was at the lowest points in living memory. And a paper was published, the Bitcoin white paper, written under the pseudonym Satoshi Nakamoto, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Its core proposition was almost too simple. What if we replace institutional trust with cryptography and distributed consensus? Who do you trust more, the man in a suit or maths and logic? And that question didn't come out of nowhere. So this came from a longer lineage, and David Chalmers' 1985 paper on anonymous transaction systems. This was during the cypherpunk movement in San Francisco in the early 90s. It was a community of libertarian technologists who were deeply suspicious of centralized authority, deeply concerned about the erosion of personal autonomy, and actively building alternatives. And Bitcoin was, in many ways, a culmination of 30 years of thinking about how to create a trustless system, a ledger that is opened, distributed, permissionless, where anyone can verify any transaction and no single entity controls the whole. So I knew about Bitcoin in 2013. I was working in the space adjacent to this world, advocating for regulatory frameworks, for education into this technology, and for serious engagement of what decentralized finance could mean in financial inclusion. And the thing is, even though I worked in the space, I've never owned any crypto. Whoops. And I want to be honest about why, because I think it's really relevant for someone that's advocated for the technology, for the regulations around the technology and supported others in this space, but I never used it myself. And that's what I've always come back to when people ask me about this problem that decentralized finance is trying to solve. And my answer has always been the same. It is not solving a tangible problem. It's attempting to solve a social one. It's a problem of trust. It's a problem of access. And it's a problem of who gets to participate in financial systems and on whose terms. So let's look at a few futuristic concepts and what I actually believe in. So let me tell you what I actually think the future of money actually looks like, and not the hype version. This is my insights that I have. The version that I think is structurally inevitable if we pay attention to the patterns. The first thing that I want to say is that the current financial systems have a fundamental design flaw that very few people are keen to say out loud, which is this. The banks are permitted to lend money that doesn't actually exist and charge interest on it. And this is fractional reserve banking. So the money that most of us think of as real, the digits in our accounts, is largely created through lending. It is, in a very meaningful sense, imaginary. And this imaginary money has been the engine of an economy that has progressively concentrated wealth at the top of the pyramid and extracted from the bottom. And now we've been playing around with new versions of this same logic and seeing this play out in real time. The abstraction just keeps going, and at some point, and I think we're approaching it, as enough people recognize that the pattern of the social agreement underneath all of this is starting to crack. But I think that blockchain and decentralized tech represent something genuinely important within this context, not because it's a silver bullet, but because I think it does offer a new architectural premise, an open ledger, distributed consensus, and the ability to build financial infrastructure that doesn't require a central gatekeeper. And when you layer AI, and not just AI in a chatbot, but AI as an ambient infrastructure embedded in the systems we move through every day, the possibilities for what an economy could look like will shift significantly. The question of what work is, what value creation looks like, and what we exchange and why, those questions are going to be forced upon us and open new doors in ways that will feel uncomfortable but also give us so much clarity at the same time. But here's the other element to all of this. It's the geopolitical tension we have right now. We are moving towards a time of fragmentation, economically, politically, in terms of what might be loosely called a rules-based international order. In that environment, the question of financial infrastructure becomes a question of sovereignty. So who controls these payment rails? Whose currencies do we use when the dominant one is being weaponized through sanctions? And what happens to the small economies like in Aotearoa when global volatility increases? I don't think the answer is crypto in its current form, but I do think the answer involves rebuilding financial systems on architecture that are more resilient, more distributed, more legible to the people who depend upon them. I think open banking is a start. I think central bank digital currencies are a real development worth watching and looking into. And I think a healthy amount of scrutiny upon those who control them and what surveillance capabilities they embed as well. And I think underneath all of this that I've always thought about, but kind of kept a little bit silent, is that I think that what we're looking for is something that's very old and underutilized, and an economy that might look a little bit less efficient than what we have right now, but something that anthropologists have been studying in the so-called traditional societies over centuries, right? A system where the flow of goods, skills, and resources are organized around relationships, reciprocity, and genuine needs rather than abstracted accumulation. And again, back in my own backyard here in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have this word for this relational logic already embedded in our cultural fabric. It's called koha. It's a gift, a contribution, an offering. It's not a payment, but a gesture of goodwill and care that maintains the social fabric. So when I was at uni, we used to throw these events for our zine that we used to launch every month. For our target demographic of a poor Dunedin student who couldn't afford a ticket, we would offer a koha. If you could come along, bring a koha, all good. So this was about knowing our demographic and, being amenable to that and what their needs were and what they could contribute to us. And if you think about my own example where we built community and no value was extracted through margins, it wasn't naive. It was actually really sophisticated understanding of how value circulates in a really healthy and social system. So an economist of Apadurai, I hope I really pronounced that right, he was writing in 1986 that made a point that commodities aren't empty, endlessly exchangeable things devoid of meaning. They have histories, identities, and moral values as well. The things that we exchange carry the social relationship through what they've just passed. And the thing is, we've built systems that strip this away as efficiently as possible. So what we can actually do to build the future as individuals, as builders, and as regulators. So I want to be direct here because this is where a lot of the conversations about the future of money either become incredibly abstract or prescriptive, and it doesn't actually land. And I'm not going to tell you to, buy gold or hold cash or invest in a particular asset class. Your financial decisions are your own, and you should make them with proper advice from people who are qualified to give it. I'm not, I'm just a technologist. But here is what I will say, and I mean this both practically and philosophically as well. So for individuals, and this is genuinely where a bank being down is a little bit instructive, the first thing is to reconnect with your actual relationship to value. And this is not abstract wealth, not numbers on a screen, but what you actually depend on. What can you actually provide to the world, and what do you have to exchange? Think about what you would do if the app was down for an entire week and not just a morning. And not from panic perspective. I want you to think about this from a really grounded, community-oriented one. Do you have cash? Do you know your neighbors? Do you have skills and resources that someone nearby you needs and you can exchange for them? And there's a reason why I keep coming back to cash as a symbol rather than just a practical tool. So, cash is a physical object that represents a shared agreement. It has weight. You hand it over and something changes hands. There's a directness to that exchange that digital money abstracts away completely. And we've become accustomed to imaginary money that we've started to forget the value an exchange actually feels like at the level of a human relationship. And there's something very Harry Potter about this, like Dudley Dursley receiving 36 presents and still feeling like he hasn't been given enough because he's actually hungry for attention and love, not the presents itself. And this number keeps going up and up and up every year, right? And then we see Harry on his birthday. Hagrid shows up with a wonky and slightly squashed birthday cake. And that meant so much to Harry because the care behind it and the meaning behind it was real. That's a real gift. And I think that sort of sentiment is missing from a lot of our financial thinking. It's not the mechanism, but the meaning behind it. So for the builders and those technologists, founders, and the ones designing the next era of financial infrastructure, my ask is this: build for access, not just for efficiency. The most sophisticated systems in the world are useless if it excludes the people who need it the most, or if it replicates existing power structures within new code. Decentralization is only meaningful if it's actually distributing power. Open banking is only meaningful if the people that it's supposed to serve can genuinely use it. Build with the everyday person in your mental mode and not just the early adopter. And for the regulators, I have a lot of views here, but the most important thing is to engage seriously and educate rather than oscillating between permissiveness and panic. The regulatory environment around digital currencies have been globally a mess of inconsistency, and that inconsistency has created the exact conditions in which bad actors thrive. But with clear, principled, forward-thinking frameworks built on genuine understanding of the technology and not the fear of it, is what actually allows for legitimate innovation to happen safely. We need regulators who are also students of the space, and that has to be a requirement. And for all of us collectively, there is a larger game being played here that I think Warren Buffett understood intuitively, even if he never articulated it into these terms. That the most durable form of wealth is not what you accumulate, it's what you build relationships around. And the people who will navigate the next era of economic volatility best are not necessarily the ones with the most assets. They're the ones who are embedded in communities of reciprocity, who have the skills that others need, who have practiced the art of exchange at the very human scale. So the future of money is not just a technology question. It never was and never will be. It's a question about what we value, who gets to say so, and what kind of social fabric do we want to build our agreements on top of. The technology is just a tool for what that conversation is. It's a genuinely important one with real possibilities embedded within it, but it doesn't answer the question. We have to answer the question ourselves. And I think a bank outage, even if it is just minor and short-lived, it does give us a little preview about how fragile some of our assumptions are. The infrastructure is aging, the geopolitical environment is tightening, and the gap between the financial system and what it was designed for and the world we actually live in is getting wider, not narrower. And that's not a reason to panic. It's just a reason to get serious about building something better and to start that process with genuine clarity about where we're actually going and what we're trying to actually achieve. So I've spent many years in the space advocating for new forms of money and finance without personally betting on any particular horse, and I stand by that. The underlying pattern is what matters here. It isn't the technology, it isn't who makes it, it's just about what it is underneath it all. These experiments and playing with innovation when it comes to money are completely necessary, and the thinking of this needs to expand. And the more that we can root into thinking about genuine human need rather than speculative opportunity, the better the outcome will be for the everyday person and not just a few. So if today's episode got you thinking, you can come and join your journey with us. We post on Instagram almost daily to share insights and inspiration for founders and future-facing leaders. It's a good place to stay curious. And if you're ready to go deeper, you can head over to our website at RobinsonHewitt.com, where we work at the intersection of anthropology, emerging technology, and long-term systems change to help future-facing leaders and founders and organizations transform, evolve, and build the next era. If you're still orienting, we have a lot of free resources available to help you on your founder's journey. But if you're ready to take the leap, you can see our services online. Everything is linked below, and I will see you in the next one. Ciao.